Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. Today we're going to be talking about the billion-dollar fraud that was Theranos, and how there's lessons to be learned here that apply to political activists today. Okay, this story really applies to anybody, I believe, who cares about political activism, who wants to speak truth to power, who's a whistleblower, who wants to make a difference and expose the truth, who you know something is wrong where you live or where you're working or with your local government or your school board. You know there's something wrong. And this is how the Theranos story really struck home with me, because it's really something that people can learn quite a bit about. Now, what I'm going to talk about here are basically the 6 lessons that this author wrote about when he was talking about the Theranos story and the whole story behind it. And I hadn't read this author until I saw his 3rd part that came out. And these 6 lessons I thought were really relevant. And that's what I have the story linked below, so if you want to see the original story that I'm basing this on, I've taken some of his 6 lessons and applied it here. And this really goes back to the Theranos story and its founder, Elizabeth Holmes, who started this company and just brought in an unbelievable amount of money, about $1 billion, and was tied in at the highest levels of political and corporate power in America. She was appointed by Obama to positions of power, prestige on the cover of Forbes magazine, many other magazines as well. Was well known in Silicon Valley, made all these headlines in all the business journals. Everybody thought she walked on water. First female billionaire. It was a big deal, right? And then suddenly, there was a huge collapse, and it turned out that everything she said was a lie, that she was a fraud, that it was a scam, and that $1 billion vanished in essentially what was a scam. And people wondered, how the heck did this happen with so many powerful people involved? How could they be fooled by somebody like this? And this is a real interesting story, because to get to the point where you're going to lose $1 billion, it requires you to step on a lot of toes and to conceal the truth from a lot of people. And some of those people are quite capable of knowing what the truth is when it's presented to them. But what this really is a story about the whistleblowers, a small team of people who were willing to come forward. I have a photo here of 2 of them, Tyler and Erica, who were employees that worked at Theranos, but they weren't alone. There were 3 other people that actually were involved in this, including a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. And it seemed like the deck was stacked against them as they realized something was wrong, something was dishonest, and they were trying to expose the truth. And then all the pressure that came down on them, being surveilled, being threatened, being harassed, litigation, unbelievable amounts of pressure that were put on them to silence them at every opportunity. It seemed like there was no way that they were going to see any resolution from their efforts. And in fact, it seemed like a hopeless cause. And the 6 lessons ultimately, and I think these really apply to activists, really start out with the first one: do not be intimidated. This is important. If you're an activist and you care about being involved in local government and you want to be involved in making an impact and exposing the truth, they're going to want to intimidate you. They're going to want to make it feel like that's something that you shouldn't do. They're going to scare you, and that's oftentimes the first step, as they try to scare you away, make it seem like it's not something that you should be doing. The second thing to remember is that it only takes a few courageous individuals to stand up and make that impact. In this case, in the Theranos story, it only really took 5 people and who kind of came together for different reasons, and they realized it was a scam and a fraud and a scandal, and they were engaged and got involved. And that small group of people brought down $1 billion fraud. Government's the same way. Even though government has more money and they squander more than that on a regular basis, looking at a local school board, looking at your city council, looking at your state government, looking at even a federal agency, only a few courageous individuals who want to bond together, who want to work together, who want to focus on exposing the truth, they can make a huge difference. The 3rd rule was do not be impressed with their tech. Now, the author meant this as it applied to Theranos and how they attempted to snow everybody with this mystery magic tech that nobody else could understand, because these people were so smart they actually knew what was going on and nobody else did. That's kind of the same attitude the government oftentimes has when new people get involved and they're concerned about CRT education in their schools, about what's happening to the missing millions of dollars at your county government, or exactly what's going on with that state politician, the grant grifting games that are happening in the community. And they want to snow you with all kinds of confusion and details and acronyms and confusing laws and rules don't be impressed by that. That is usually a smokescreen for bad behavior behind the scenes, and it's worth digging deeper. Because at the end of the day, rule number 4, which is a good lesson for all to remember, a lot of these people are actually quite stupid. They're certainly not as smart as they pretend to be, and although they may be able to communicate and sound like they are really sharp and smart, the reality is the deeper you dig, the more you're going to find out that the incompetence and the foolishness and the bizarre behavior that you see occurring is not because these guys are evil geniuses. It's because they really aren't that smart after all. Which leads to the 5th rule, and this is one to remember. Resistance is never futile. It's a great lesson, and it's one to remember. We cannot forget it. Resistance is never futile. If you're going to sit back and roll over in your grave and just hide and try to bunker up and pretend that you can't make a difference, then that is exactly what they want you to do. Apathy is the friend of corrupt government, and you want to know that resistance, pushing back, speaking truth to power, that is never futile. It may not change the ship right away. You may not be able to expose exactly what you want right away, but that is the process of eventually making change, being resistant to that. And if you aren't, that's gonna basically, you're never gonna make a difference. Truth is important. That's the final rule and lesson for activists, I think, as it applies from the story, and I think it applies to all of us wherever we are working with government. Sometimes it's hard to get to the truth. It's not easy to find. It's buried under mountains of public records. It's buried in the mind of whistleblowers who may or may not be willing to come forward. It's concealed in those grant grifting schemes and contracts that you're trying to get a hold of. And yet eventually, when you find that truth, it is important, and it's important to expose it. The truth will set you free, even if it makes a lot of politicians angry. And it's something that you should always be seeking as an activist when you're trying to make an impact and a difference. I think these 6 rules are actually pretty important, and they're something that most of us could live by, because at the end of the day, when you're looking at a politician, what the first thing that Governor Inslee wants you to know is that resistance is futile. He wants you to believe that you're alone, that you're isolated, nobody else feels the same way you do. That's why they have a lot of control over the media, and they care about their narrative more than they care about the truth. Resistance is futile. That's what they want you to believe, but that's not true. And there was a great quote in this article that I had here, and I'm going to repeat it here because I think it applies all the time. They is really referring to those who are in charge of government, or in this case, in the article, it was those in charge of a big multi-billion-dollar company, but they have trouble distinguishing between their delusions of omnipotence from what's actually achievable in the real world. And of course, if you're looking at Inslee, this was illustrated most clearly in his recent TVW article or interview, where he said that only he could save the people of Washington State. That is really ridiculous, but that's what he said. So remember, as activists, we have to push back, expose the truth, confront the powerful, and speak truth to power. Resistance is never futile. So join the resistance. Because eventually, if you're willing to confront and expose the truth, headlines like this are what come about once the truth is exposed. And you never know, we may have a headline like this in the near future because of efforts that you and I and others are taking to expose the truth wherever we might be. So this is very important. Join the resistance, join with other people, and be focused on pushing back. Don't give up. So if you want to learn more, please go to wethegovern.com. I linked to some relevant articles down below, including the article that I referenced here in this video. And if you want to subscribe, please do that below and share this video as well. That's the only way these videos get out. I'm positive this channel is being shadow banned, but by sharing it with others, at least they can see it as long as I have the YouTube channel up. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave those down below. I do try to respond to most of the comments that people leave on the videos, and I try to get back to you as best I can. So thank you so much for watching, and remember, the future does belong to those who show up.